The House Oversight Committee room fell silent as Bondi stepped up to the microphone, her confident stride and unwavering gaze fixed forward as camera lights flashed around her. The former Florida Attorney General's navy suit stood in stark contrast to the chaotic atmosphere that had dominated the high-stakes hearing just moments before. Across the chamber sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, surrounded by allies, a satisfied smile playing on her lips after her passionate 15-minute speech, accusing former President Trump's allies of corruption and obstruction. Bondi doesn't stand a chance against Crockett's legal background, whispered one spectator to another, loud enough for nearby microphones to pick up. But something in Bondi's expression, calm, focused, almost predatory, suggested she came armed with more than just talking points. The room tensed as she adjusted her microphone, opened a leather portfolio, and extracted what appeared to be several document folders, marked with yellow tabs. "Before I begin my testimony," Bondi started, her voice cutting through the chamber with surprising authority, "I'd like to address some of Representative Crockett's claims directly." Crockett's head snapped up, her expression shifting from relaxed confidence to sudden alertness. "That's not the protocol," Crockett began, but Bondi continued speaking right over her. "Your entire premise is fundamentally flawed," Bondi stated firmly, holding up the first document, "and I have the evidence right here." The committee chairman's gavel struck once, twice, but neither woman appeared to notice. The first interruption had begun, and within seconds, the carefully orchestrated hearing devolved into something no one had anticipated. 7 times, Bondi would cut across Crockett's protests, each interruption more devastating than the last. But it was her 8th response, delivered with laser precision while cameras rolled, that would leave Crockett speechless and send shockwaves through Washington. This wasn't just another congressional hearing. It was about to become the political confrontation of the year. Before we dive deeper into this explosive exchange, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more breaking political analysis that the mainstream media won't show you. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming coverage of Washington's most shocking moments. Bondi hadn't planned to be at the center of this political firestorm. The former Florida Attorney General had built her career on being meticulous, strategic, and unflappable. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her navy suit impeccably pressed, the picture of conservative professionalism. At 56, Bondi had weathered countless political battles, serving as Florida's first female attorney general for 8 years before advising President Trump during his first impeachment trial. Her reputation as a tough prosecutor preceded her, but today's hearing wasn't supposed to feature Bondi as the main character. She had been called merely as a witness regarding Justice Department procedures, a technical expert, not a combatant. Across the chamber sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, the rising Democratic star from Texas, whose quick rise to prominence had been fueled by her fiery speeches and confrontational style. At 42, Crockett had leveraged her background as a civil rights attorney to become one of the most vocal critics of the previous administration. Her designer glasses and bold red blazer projected confidence and authority as she leaned forward at the committee dais. The hearing had been called to investigate allegations of obstruction and corruption among former Trump allies, with Democrats controlling the committee and Republicans on defense. For weeks, the media had built up Crockett as the Democrats' most effective weapon, a former defense attorney whose questioning could break even the most practiced witnesses. Congresswoman Crockett has been preparing for this hearing for months, CNN had reported that morning. Sources say she has compiled a damning case that could lead to additional investigations. But what the cameras didn't show was Bondi in the preparation room 2 hours earlier. While the media focused on Crockett's planned offensive, Bondi sat alone reviewing a thick folder of documents that had been delivered to her only the previous evening. "Are these verified?" she had asked her aide, a young man who had worked in the DOJ's records division. "Yes, ma'am," he'd replied quietly. "Authenticated this morning. Nobody's seen these except a handful of people." Bondi had studied the papers carefully, her expression revealing nothing as she processed the implications. Then she had made several calls, including one to a former colleague who now worked in the National Archives. "I need one more document," she'd said, "and I need absolute certainty it's authentic." Now, as the hearing room hummed with tension, those documents sat in Bondi's portfolio, evidence that would challenge not just Crockett's allegations, but her credibility. The stakes couldn't have been higher for either woman. For Crockett, this hearing represented an opportunity to cement her reputation as the Democrats' most effective interrogator and possibly launch investigations that could damage Republicans ahead of the next election cycle. For Bondi, this unexpected confrontation represented something else entirely. A chance to defend not just the previous administration, but the integrity of the institutions being weaponized for political purposes. The American people deserve the truth, Bondi had told her aide before entering the chamber. Not political theater. What neither woman fully realized was how completely this hearing would transform both their reputations. C-SPAN had expected a routine procedural session. Instead, their cameras were about to capture a historic political showdown that would go viral within hours. As Bondi arranged her documents at the witness table, Chairman Thompson addressed the committee. We'll now hear testimony from former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi regarding Department of Justice procedures during the previous administration. Bondi leaned toward the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I address the committee's questions, I feel compelled to correct some serious mischaracterizations that Congresswoman Crockett just presented as fact. Crockett immediately pressed her own microphone button. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The witness is not here to critique my statements, but to answer our questions. Chairman Thompson nodded. Ms. Bondi, please restrict your comments to responding to direct questions from the committee. Bondi nodded respectfully, but those who knew her recognized the slight smile that meant she had no intention of being silenced. The stage was set for confrontation, with millions watching live and neither woman willing to back down. Ms. Bondi, Crockett began once questioning started, her voice carrying the practiced precision of a seasoned attorney. You served in the previous administration during a period when many career Justice Department officials resigned in protest. Were you aware of the unprecedented turnover and the reasons behind it? The question was clearly designed as a trap. Either Bondi would admit to knowledge of internal problems, or she would appear oblivious to major issues within her own department. Crockett sat back slightly, the satisfied expression of a prosecutor who had just laid the perfect groundwork for a devastating follow-up. But Bondi didn't take the bait. Congresswoman, I appreciate the question, Bondi replied, her southern accent becoming slightly more pronounced. But your premise contains a significant factual error I need to address first. First interruption. The DOJ's turnover rate during that period was actually lower than during the previous administration's final 2 years. I have the official personnel records right here. Bondi held up a document with official government letterhead. Crockett attempted to interject. That's not what multiple whistleblowers have. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and DOJ Human Resources confirmed these numbers last month, Bondi continued, speaking directly over Crockett's protest. And I've highlighted the comparative analysis on page 4 for the committee's reference. The chairman tapped his gavel. The witness will allow the committee members to complete their questions. Bondi nodded deferentially. Of course, Mr. Chairman. I just believe accurate information should be the foundation of this committee's work. Several Republican committee members nodded their approval, while Crockett shuffled through her notes, clearly recalibrating her approach. Let's move on, Crockett said, her voice slightly less confident. You were directly involved in advising on the investigation into foreign influence that Democrats have characterized as politically motivated. How do you respond to allegations that the investigation targeted political opponents? Second interruption. I have to interrupt that characterization, Bondi said, her tone measured but firm. The investigation was initiated based on evidence provided by career FBI officials, not political appointees. She extracted another document from her portfolio. This memo from then FBI Director Christopher Wray, who was not a Trump loyalist by any measure, specifically states the investigation originated from standard intelligence channels and followed established protocols. The date on this memo, Congresswoman, is particularly relevant. Crockett tried to regain control. Ms. Bondi, I'm conducting this questioning. It's dated January 19, 2021, the day before the new administration took office, Bondi continued, ignoring the interruption. Director Wray was documenting the proper procedures followed, knowing he would continue serving in the new administration. Whispers rippled through the chamber. Crockett's Democratic colleagues looked increasingly uncomfortable. Chairman Thompson intervened. Ms. Bondi, I must insist you allow the Congresswoman to complete her questions before responding. "I apologize, Mr. Chairman," Bondi said, not looking remotely apologetic. "I simply want to ensure this committee has factual information." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Crockett took a sip of water, her earlier confidence visibly shaken. "Third interruption," Bondi Crockett began again, her voice taking on a harder edge. "Multiple witnesses have testified about pressure to alter reports to align with the previous president's public statements. Were you aware of these incidents?" "I have to correct the record again," Bondi said immediately. "The witnesses you're referring to, and I believe you mean Mr. Hargrove and Ms. Winters, both amended their testimony when presented with their own email." Bondi produced yet another document. "This is the transcript from Mr. Hargrove's second deposition, where he states, and I quote, 'I may have misremembered the sequence of events. The changes to the report were made based on new intelligence, not political pressure.'" Crockett's face flushed. "Mr. Chairman, the witness is clearly trying to run out the clock by interrupting." "I'm simply providing documented facts that contradict your question's premises," Bondi replied calmly. Ms. Winters similarly revised her testimony, as shown on page 42 of her follow-up deposition. The Republican members were now sitting forward, several openly smiling at Bondi's unexpected counteroffensive. Representative Jordan whispered something to his colleague, who nodded with obvious satisfaction. "Let me be very direct, Ms. Bondi," Crockett said, her voice now carrying an edge of frustration. "Do you deny that the White House pressured the DOJ to investigate political opponents?" "I have to challenge that characterization," Bondi responded immediately. "What you're calling political opponents were individuals identified in lawful intelligence-gathering operations." She removed yet another document from her portfolio. "This declassified intelligence assessment from our allies in the Five Eyes community independently verified the concerns that led to those investigations." "Bondi," Crockett began. "The operations in question were reviewed by the DOJ Inspector General," Bondi continued, "who found they adhered to established investigative protocols." That's a direct quote from page 17 of the IG report that, curiously, wasn't included in this committee's briefing materials. Chairman Thompson's gavel came down harder this time. "Ms. Bondi, this is your final warning about interrupting committee members." "I understand, Mr. Chairman," Bondi replied. "I'm simply trying to provide full context in the interests of truth." The tension in the room was now palpable. What had begun as a routine oversight hearing had transformed into an unexpected duel, with Bondi parrying each of Crockett's attacks with documented evidence that contradicted the committee's carefully constructed narrative. Fifth interruption. Crockett, visibly frustrated, changed tactics. "Your loyalty to the former president is well documented. Miss Bondi, the American people deserve to know if you were involved in discussions about using the DOJ to overturn election results." "I have to stop you right there," Bondi said, her voice showing the first signs of genuine emotion. "That allegation has been thoroughly debunked by multiple investigations, including those conducted by this very committee." She produced a thin blue folder. "This is the transcript from Acting Attorney General Rosen's testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, where he stated unequivocally that such conversations never occurred with me present." "That doesn't mean," Crockett attempted. "Furthermore," Bondi continued, "this sworn affidavit from Jeffrey Clark, who was accused of being involved in such discussions, specifically states that I advised all DOJ officials to follow only lawful orders and proper procedures during that period." The Democratic side of the committee was now in visible disarray. Several members were frantically flipping through their briefing books, while others whispered urgently to staff members. Chairman Thompson leaned over to consult with the committee counsel, who appeared to be shaking his head in confusion. Sixth interruption. "Let's discuss your current advocacy work, Ms. Bondi," Crockett said, attempting to shift to safer ground. "Your organization has received significant funding from industries that benefited from the previous administration's policies. Do you see this as a conflict of interest when you publicly defend those same policies?" "I need to correct that mischaracterization as well," Bondi interjected. "My organization's funding is transparently disclosed, unlike many advocacy groups that support your positions." She produced a spreadsheet. "This is a comparison of donor disclosures between my organization and the 3 primary groups cited in this committee's briefing materials. You'll note that we disclose 100% of our donors, while these other organizations disclose less than 30% of their funding sources. That's not relevant to, Crockett started. It's directly relevant to your implication of impropriety, Bondi replied. Additionally, my organization's work has been consistent regardless of which party controls the White House. We advocated for the same transparency measures during both the Obama and Biden administration. The Republican committee members were now barely containing their satisfaction. What had been planned as a showcase for Crockett's prosecutorial skills had become something entirely different. Crockett, now visibly angry, made one final attempt to regain control. Ms. Bondi, your consistent interruptions and attempts to reframe this hearing cannot disguise the fact that serious ethical breaches occurred under the administration you served and continued to defend. The American people deserve accountability, not obstruction disguised as clarification. I must object to that characterization, Bondi replied, her voice still remarkably calm. Providing documented evidence isn't obstruction. It's precisely the accountability you claim to seek. She leaned forward slightly. Congressman, with all due respect, I've provided official records, sworn testimony, and authenticated documents to correct mischaracterizations in your questions. If accuracy and truth are considered obstruction, then perhaps we have different understandings of this committee's purpose. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking their cameras as the tension built. Crockett stared at Bondi, clearly calculating her next move, in a confrontation that had veered dramatically off her planned course. Chairman Thompson cleared his throat. The Congresswoman's time has expired. We'll move to Representative Jordan for his questions. But before Jordan could begin, Crockett raised her hand. Mr. Chairman, I request additional time to respond to the witness's mischaracterizations of my questions. The chairman hesitated, then nodded. 2 additional minutes. What happened next would transform a contentious congressional hearing into a viral moment that would dominate news cycles for days to come. Crockett leaned toward her microphone, her composure recovered and her voice taking on the resonant quality that had made her famous during previous hearings. This was her moment to reassert control, to turn Bondi's interruptions against her and reclaim the narrative. Ms. Bondi, she began, your constant interruptions and selective presentation of documents may impress those who already support your political agenda, but they don't change fundamental facts. The previous administration was marked by unprecedented attacks on our democratic institutions. Your technical objections and cherry-picked documents don't erase the pattern of abuse that the American people witnessed firsthand. Crockett paused, looking directly at Bondi. My question is simple, and I'd appreciate a direct answer without interruption. Do you acknowledge that the previous president pressured Justice Department officials to support his false claims of election fraud? Yes or no? It was a masterful recovery. A question that put Bondi in an impossible position. A yes would contradict her defense of the administration. A no would contradict public testimony from multiple officials. The chamber held its breath as all eyes turned to Bondi. For the first time, Bondi didn't immediately respond. She looked down at her documents, then back at Crockett. The silence stretched for 5 long seconds, an eternity in congressional testimony. The camera zoomed in on Bondi's face, capturing what appeared to be genuine consideration. The 8th response. When Bondi finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before, but the microphone carried every word with perfect clarity. Congresswoman Crockett, I've sat here patiently correcting mischaracterizations with documented evidence, but your last statement demands a more fundamental response. She paused, closing her portfolio deliberately. I didn't want to do this, but you've left me no choice. Bondi reached into her briefcase and removed a final document, this one in a red folder that hadn't been visible before. 3 weeks ago, this committee requested documents from the National Archives regarding DOJ communications. What you didn't know is that I was copied on those communications as part of my official duties. Bondi opened the red folder. Last night, I received this, a complete copy of the email thread that this committee received in heavily redacted form. The room went completely still. The original emails show something remarkable, Bondi continued. They reveal that on January 3, 2021, you personally, Congresswoman Crockett, then working as a state representative, sent a letter to transition team officials advocating for the exact same type of DOJ intervention you're now condemning. Gasps echoed through the chamber. In your letter, Bondi continued, her voice steady, you urge the incoming administration to, and I quote, use every available DOJ resource to investigate and prosecute officials from the previous administration who may have violated their oaths. You specifically requested investigations without first establishing evidence of crimes, precisely the action you're now claiming was an abuse of power. Bondi held up the document so cameras could clearly capture it. The difference, Congresswoman, isn't whether DOJ resources were used for political purposes. It's whose politics they served. Crockett's face drained of color. She frantically whispered to a staff member who began typing furiously on a laptop. What's most troubling, Bondi continued, isn't that you held this position. Many did, on both sides. It's that this committee deliberately withheld the unredacted emails that would have revealed your personal involvement in advocating for the very actions you're condemning today. Chairman Thompson banged his gavel. The witness will refrain from making accusations against committee members. I'm not making accusations, Mr. Chairman, Bondi replied calmly. I'm providing documented evidence, the complete email thread with verified authentication markers from the National Archives. I've provided copies for each committee member. An aide began distributing folders to stunned committee members on both sides of the aisle. This isn't about defending any administration, Bondi said, her voice now carrying unexpected emotion. This is about the dangerous precedent of weaponizing congressional oversight for partisan purposes while deliberately concealing relevant evidence from the American people. Crockett finally found her voice. Chairman, I object to this ambush with documents that weren't provided to the committee in advance. Bondi responded instantly. With respect, Congresswoman, every document I've presented today was either produced by this committee, available in public records, or was specifically requested by committee staff. The complete email thread was available to you. Your staff chose to present only redacted portions that supported a predetermined narrative. Republican committee members were now openly reviewing the documents, several shaking their heads in apparent disbelief. Representative Jordan held up his copy, showing a colleague what appeared to be highlighted sections. Mr. Chairman, Jordan called out, I move that we recess to review these documents and determine how heavily redacted materials were presented to this committee without the knowledge of all members. The chairman, now looking deeply concerned, consulted briefly with the committee counsel again. This hearing will stand in recess for 1 hour, he announced, bringing down his gavel with finality. As members began to file out, cameras captured the defining image of the hearing. Crockett, papers scattered before her, staring in apparent shock at the document in her hands, while Bondi calmly organized her portfolio, her expression betraying neither triumph nor animosity, just the quiet confidence of someone who had come prepared for exactly this moment. Outside in the hallway, reporters swarmed around various committee members, but it was Representative Jordan's comment that would headline news coverage within the hour. What we just witnessed wasn't just a witness defending herself. It was the exposure of a carefully constructed narrative designed to mislead the American people. Pam Bondi just did this country an enormous service. As the recess began, videos of the exchange were already spreading across social media. What had begun as Crockett's opportunity to shine had become Bondi's moment of vindication and Crockett's public undoing. The eighth response hadn't just interrupted Crockett, it had fundamentally changed the entire hearing's trajectory and raised serious questions about the committee's integrity. The confrontation had lasted less than an hour, but its impact would resonate through Washington for months to come. The 1-hour recess stretched to 3 as committee members huddled with staff, reviewing the documents Bondi had provided. Inside the closed committee room, raised voices could occasionally be heard through the doors. Reporters and staffers clustered in the hallways, sharing rumors and refreshing social media feeds as clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire. Bondi bombshell. Former AG exposes committee cover-up, read the Chiron on Fox News. Contentious hearing raises questions about document handling, was CNN's more measured headline. Within 2 hours, the hashtags Bondi bombshell and the eighth interruption were trending nationally. Political commentators from across the spectrum scrambled to analyze what had happened. When the committee finally reconvened, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Chairman Thompson's opening statement set the tone. Reviewing the materials presented by the witness, this committee has determined that certain documents provided to members were inappropriately redacted in a manner that may have misled the committee's understanding of key events. We will be conducting an internal review of our document handling procedures. The cameras caught Crockett's face, composed but tight-lipped, as the chairman essentially confirmed Bondi's allegations. More significantly, several Democratic members who had been Crockett's strongest allies were noticeably not sitting near her. Outside the hearing room, the political implications spread rapidly. At the White House, Press Secretary Marcus Williams faced a barrage of questions about the hearing during his daily briefing. The president believes congressional oversight is essential to our democracy, but it must be conducted with transparency and integrity, he stated carefully. We're still gathering information about today's hearing and won't comment on specific allegations until we have all the facts. His non-denial was telling. The administration was creating distance from Crockett, once considered a rising star in the party. On Capitol Hill, the fallout was immediate and substantial. 3 additional committee members issued statements expressing concern about the handling of documents and calling for a formal review of committee procedures. Congressional staffers reported the Democratic leadership was meeting urgently to discuss damage control. By evening, the story had moved beyond the specific confrontation to larger questions about congressional oversight and political motivations. What began as a routine hearing has raised serious concerns about how congressional committees handle evidence, noted veteran political analyst Michael Barnes on his evening broadcast. The implications extend far beyond a single confrontation between Bondi and Crockett. They touch on fundamental questions of trust in our governmental institutions. Conservative media celebrated Bondi as a hero who had exposed what they characterized as a deliberate attempt to mislead the public. Liberal outlets were more cautious, acknowledging the apparent document issues while questioning Bondi's motivations in her presentation. Social media amplified the story further, with users dissecting every moment of the exchange. One clip showing Crockett's expression when Bondi revealed the unredacted emails had been viewed over 7 million times by nightfall. As evening fell in Washington, both women were dealing with the aftermath in characteristic ways. Pam Bondi declined all media requests, issuing only a brief statement. Today wasn't about partisan politics, it was about ensuring the American people received the full truth. I presented documented evidence and stand by everything I said in that hearing room. Jasmine Crockett initially scheduled a press conference, then canceled it an hour before it was set to begin. Her office released a statement claiming Bondi had mischaracterized private communications, but notably did not deny the authenticity of the documents presented. Behind closed doors, the political calculations were already shifting. Sources close to Democratic leadership reported that Crockett, previously slated for a prominent speaking role at an upcoming party event, was being reassigned to a less visible position. Republican strategists, meanwhile, were already discussing how to leverage Bondi's unexpected moment in the spotlight. By midnight, fundraising emails featuring the confrontation had generated over $3 million, 0 cents for Republican candidates. The next morning's headlines told the story of a political earthquake. The Washington Post oversight hearing derailed. Questions emerge about committee document handling. The New York Times, after contentious exchange, committee announces review of evidence procedures. The Wall Street Journal, Bondi-Crockett confrontation exposes partisan divide in congressional oversight. Bombshell, Bondi exposes Dem conspiracy to mislead Americans. MSNBC, Republican witness disrupts hearing with surprise documents. The impact extended beyond media coverage. By the following week, 3 significant developments had occurred. First, the House Ethics Committee announced a formal investigation into the handling of documents by the Oversight Committee's staff, focusing specifically on whether information had been improperly withheld from committee members. Second, 2 senior staff members from the Oversight Committee resigned, citing personal reasons, but widely understood to be connected to the document controversy. Third, and perhaps most significantly, polling showed a substantial shift in public perception of congressional investigations. Trust in congressional oversight had dropped 12 points overall, with the decline most pronounced among independent voters. For the individuals at the center of the storm, the long-term implications were substantial. Pam Bondi, who had largely stepped back from the public spotlight after her time in the Trump administration, was suddenly in high demand. She received speaking invitations from conservative organizations across the country and was rumored to be considering a return to politics, possibly a Senate run in her home state of Florida. Her measured performance, firm but not overtly partisan, had resonated with voters tired of political theatrics. What made Bondi's approach so effective wasn't just the evidence she presented, noted political strategist Rebecca Sanderson. It was her demeanor. She didn't appear to be seeking a viral moment or political advantage. She came across as someone genuinely concerned with setting the record straight, which made her message all the more powerful. For Jasmine Crockett, the path forward was considerably more complicated. Once celebrated as a rising star in progressive circles, she now faced questions about her credibility and judgment. Several colleagues who had previously sought joint appearances with her quietly distanced themselves. More concerning for her political future, primary challengers in her district began to emerge, sensing vulnerability where none had existed before. The damage to Crockett isn't just about one bad hearing, explained political analyst James Worthington, is about the contrast between her carefully cultivated image as a champion of transparency and accountability and the revelation that she may have benefited from selectively presented information. That kind of contradiction strikes at the core of a political brand. The confrontation also had broader implications for how congressional hearings were conducted. Multiple committees began reviewing their procedures for handling sensitive documents, and there was renewed discussion about the role of partisan staff in preparing materials for members. What we're seeing is a potential reset moment for congressional oversight, observed former Congressman Michael Turner. When the public believes information is being selectively presented or manipulated for partisan purposes, the legitimate oversight function of Congress is compromised. This incident has forced a reckoning with practices that had become increasingly common on both sides of the aisle. As weeks passed, the story evolved from breaking news to case study. Law schools incorporated the exchange into courses on congressional procedure and ethics. Media analysts cited it as an example of how prepared witnesses could upend carefully choreographed political theater. Perhaps most significantly, it became a reference point in discussions about the integrity of political institutions. The Bondi-Crockett exchange entered the political lexicon as shorthand for moments when carefully constructed narratives collapse under the weight of contradictory evidence. 6 months later, when the House Ethics Committee released its findings, the official conclusions were measured but clear. Committee staff had inappropriately withheld unredacted documents that should have been available to all members, creating a misleading impression of events under investigation. The report didn't single out Crockett by name, but noted that certain members were aware of the complete documents while others were not, creating an information asymmetry that undermined the committee's oversight function. For Pam Bondi, the long-term impact was a rehabilitation of her image beyond partisan lines. Even media outlets traditionally critical of Trump administration figures acknowledged her effectiveness and preparation. When she announced her intention to run for office again the following year, her campaign raised record amounts in its first week. For Jasmine Crockett, the path to political recovery proved steeper. Though she maintained her seat in the next election, her margin of victory narrowed significantly, and she was noticeably absent from prime speaking slots at major party events. The viral moment of her stunned expression as Bondi revealed the unredacted emails became an enduring meme in political circles, resurfacing whenever congressional investigations faced questions about objectivity. Beyond the personal implications, the confrontation changed how the public viewed political theater in Washington. Viewers became more skeptical of carefully crafted hearing moments, more likely to question whether they were seeing the complete picture, and more appreciative of figures who appeared to prioritize facts over partisan advantage. In an unexpected way, the Bondi-Crockett confrontation may have served as a healthy correction, wrote historian Douglas Brinkley a year after the event. It reminded both politicians and citizens that in an age of instant information and viral clips, authenticity and factual accuracy ultimately matter more than performative outrage or carefully scripted moments. The lesson that resonated beyond partisan lines was simple but powerful. In an era of decreasing trust in institutions, transparency and factual accuracy were not just ethical imperatives, but political necessity. Those who remembered this lesson prospered. Those who forgot it did so at their peril. As one congressional staffer put it in an anonymous interview, after Bondi Crockett, we started asking ourselves, before every hearing, what if someone comes with receipts? It changed how we approach everything. The confrontation that began with 7 interruptions and culminated in an 8th, devastating response had lasting impact far beyond its viral moment, reshaping not just 2 political careers but the public's expectations of political discourse itself. If you found this breakdown of Washington's most explosive confrontation revealing, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth political analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss our coverage of the stories the mainstream media won't show you in full context. Comment below with your thoughts on who really won this historic showdown between Pam Bondi